Pastor John Gray had just revealed something about Toure Roberts that no one saw coming. And from the very first moment, it felt like the kind of story that pulled people in and refused to let go. You won't believe how it all started because everything looked normal from the outside. Toure Roberts stood on huge stages, preached powerful sermons, smiled for cameras, and inspired thousands. His life looked perfect, almost too perfect. But let me tell you, behind that perfect picture, something else was happening. Something quiet, something hidden, and something far more complicated than anyone expected. People had admired him for years, but whispers had begun to grow louder. No one really knew where they came from, but slowly those whispers turned into questions, and those questions turned into rumors. Still, nothing was clear, and no one had proof. Everything stayed blurry until John Gray finally spoke. When John Gray decided to share what he had seen, listeners felt the air shift. This was not gossip. This was not a story built on random voices. This was a man who knew Toure personally, professionally, and honestly. And this is where it gets interesting. Gray didn't come with anger or hate. He came with truth that carried weight. He talked about moments behind closed doors, moments when the version of Toure that people saw on Instagram wasn't the same man leading meetings, making decisions, or handling pressure. But here is the shocking part. John Gray said that many people fell in love with the image of Toure, not the man himself. And when the image and the reality crossed paths, things became messy, confusing, and sometimes painful. He explained that on stage, Toure looked confident, calm, and sure of himself. His life looked blessed, full churches, sold-out events, luxury cars, and smiling crowds. But according to Gray, the real story lived in the struggle no one saw. There were disagreements with other pastors, arguments about leadership decisions, and rising tension that people inside the circle felt more than anyone outside ever imagined. Gray said that some choices Toure made left others shocked, wondering what pushed him to act that way. And the craziest part was that most of these moments never reached the public. They were kept quiet, covered up, and locked away as if nothing had ever happened. John Gray shared how he watched Toure try to balance the pressure of being a public figure with the weight of personal challenges. There were nights when Toure felt torn between looking strong for his followers and dealing with his own doubts inside. The expectations were heavy, and the fear of disappointing people was even heavier. Gray said that sometimes the smallest decisions turned into the biggest problems because one wrong move could be seen by thousands. And destiny took an unexpected turn when one particular disagreement became bigger than anyone predicted. It started small, like a simple difference of opinion, but slowly it grew into something deeper, something that made people question motives, loyalty, and leadership. Through all of this, Gray hinted that the biggest twist hadn't even been revealed yet. The questions were rising: who was the real Toure Roberts? What was happening behind the public smiles? And how long could someone carry two different versions of themselves? What makes this story different is that it wasn't just about a controversy. It was about a man trying to hold everything together while cracks were quietly forming underneath. And while the world kept admiring him, the people closest to him began to notice the pressure building. The whispers around Toure's name had grown even stronger, and by the time John Gray continued his story, it felt like the calm before a storm that everyone sensed but no one understood. Gray said that people only saw Toure smiling on stage, but they never saw the moments when he walked off with stress written all over his face. This is where it gets interesting, because according to Gray, the real tension didn't come from the public. It came from the people working closest to him. They had seen decisions that didn't match the polished image. They had watched arguments happen in rooms where cameras were never allowed, and they had felt the pressure of keeping everything quiet so the outside world stayed impressed. Let me tell you, the inside world was very different. One of the biggest turning points came during a major church conference that looked peaceful from the audience's view. The crowd clapped, pastors smiled, and everything appeared like a perfect picture of unity. But here is the shocking part. John Gray revealed that behind the stage, in a room everyone thought was safe and private, things had exploded Toure, and several well-known pastors had fallen into a heated argument that grew louder than anyone expected. The disagreement started with leadership style, how Toure wanted to run things versus how others believed the ministry should move forward. Soon it wasn't just about ideas. It became personal, emotional, and heavy. Some pastors walked out frustrated. Others stayed silent, unsure of what to say. And the craziest part, the crowd outside had absolutely no idea what had just happened. Gray explained that this wasn't a one-time moment. These kinds of tensions had been building for a long time. He said that people admired Toure's confidence, but sometimes that confidence turned into something stronger, something that made others feel ignored or unheard. Staff members often found themselves stuck between following Toure's direction and following their own sense of what was right. And every time someone disagreed with him, it felt like the pressure in the room rose a little higher. Destiny took an unexpected turn when one of Toure's decisions at this conference caused a huge divide. Some leaders supported him, believing he was bold. Others doubted him, thinking he was moving too fast, too strong, or too alone. John Gray remembered the tension so clearly that even while telling the story, it sounded like he was still standing in that room. He said it was one of those moments where silence had more power than words. People were afraid that if these conflicts became public, it would damage more than just reputations. It could break trust within the entire gospel community. What makes the story different is that no one on the outside ever suspected anything. They only saw smiling pictures, friendly posts, and carefully chosen words online. But the reality behind those posts was far more complicated. As Gray continued, he hinted that the deeper problem wasn't just conflict. It was the pressure Toure felt to keep his image clean. He tried to stay calm publicly, even when things were falling apart privately. He didn't want followers to question his leadership, so he hid the stress, the fear, and the moments of doubt. Gray said that Toure was trying to carry everything at once: his ministry, his reputation, his relationships, and every piece demanded something different from him. And the more he tried to handle alone, the more the pressure grew. Still, Gray said the biggest twist hadn't come yet. The decision Toure made afterward, one quiet moment, one private choice, would end up changing everything for him and everyone around him. Now your next section is remaining. John Gray's voice grew heavier when he moved deeper into the story, because this was the part where everything slowly began to unravel. He said that after the conference incident, people expected things to calm down, but instead, the pressure around Toure grew stronger every day. Toure tried to keep his public image bright, smiling in photos, posting positive messages, preaching with confidence. But behind the scenes, something inside him had started to break. Let me tell you, the people closest to him could see it. His patience grew shorter, his decisions grew faster, and the weight of trying to appear perfect became almost impossible for him to carry. This is where it gets interesting, because Gray said these were the moments when Toure stopped listening to advice and started depending only on himself. According to Gray, staff meetings that used to be calm became filled with tension. Some team members felt confused because they admired Toure deeply, but they also felt troubled by some of the choices he was making. But here's the shocking part. Instead of slowing down to think things through, Toure pushed even harder. He believed he had to prove something to himself, to his peers, and maybe even to his critics. What makes this story different is that it wasn't about fame anymore. It was about fear. Toure feared losing control, feared disappointing people, feared letting the cracks show. And the craziest part, the more he tried to hide the cracks, the wider they grew. John Gray revealed a moment that he said he would never forget. He said there were nights when Toure sat alone in his office long after everyone left. No cameras, no audience, no applause, just silence. Gray said that during one of those nights, a decision was made that would change everything. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but destiny took an unexpected turn right there. Toure had been facing pressure from every side, other pastors, his team, even from within his own home. He wanted to keep his ministry strong, but the weight of expectations was crushing him. So he made a choice, one that divided people deeply. Some believed he did it to protect the church, others believed he did it to protect himself. Gray didn't reveal every detail of that decision, but he explained the impact it had. Relationships that once felt strong began to weaken. Pastors who once stood shoulder to shoulder with him quietly stepped back. Staff members who had trusted him for years started questioning things they had never questioned before. And the audience, those thousands of people cheering for him every Sunday, they had no idea what was happening behind the curtain. Toure continued preaching, continued smiling, continued posting pictures online that made his life look like a success story, but Gray said that inside he was carrying a storm no one else could see. As time passed, that storm only grew heavier. Toure's inner circle felt torn. Should they warn him? Should they support him? Should they walk away? Gray said that the confusion inside the team was unlike anything they had experienced before. Some felt he was losing himself in the pressure. Others believed he was fighting battles no one could understand. And what makes this story even more intense is the way Gray described Toure during that season. Strong on the outside, struggling on the inside, trying to guide everyone else while he himself felt lost. And just when things seemed like they couldn't get more complicated, Gray said there was one more twist. Something hidden, something private, something that would push the story into a direction no one expected. He said that if people were shocked before, they hadn't seen anything yet. Because the event that was coming next would shake not just Toure, but everyone around him. John Gray said that the final chapter of this story wasn't loud or dramatic on the outside, but inside the gospel community, it felt like an earthquake. The pressure that had been building around Toure finally reached a point where it could no longer stay hidden. Let me tell you, this was the moment where the truth behind the image began to show itself. Toure had spent months trying to hold everything together. His team, his reputation, his friendships. But here is the shocking part. The more he tried to protect everything, the more things around him started to fall apart. And this is where it gets interesting because the real turning point didn't come from a fight or a disagreement. It came from a private conversation that John Gray described with more weight than anything else. According to Gray, a group of influential leaders gathered with Toure for what was supposed to be a simple meeting, but the atmosphere was heavy from the moment it started. Everyone in that room carried memories of past conflicts, quiet doubts, and unspoken concerns. They wanted clarity. They wanted answers. But destiny took an unexpected turn when Toure made a decision that shocked even those who thought they knew him best. Gray said some people in the room admired him for the boldness of that choice, while others felt uneasy, wondering whether the decision came from strength or from fear. The craziest part was that both groups walked out of that room changed. Nothing felt the same afterward. Not the friendships, not the trust, not the confidence people once had. Gray explained that after that meeting, the ripple effect spread fast. Leaders who had always defended Toure began questioning their loyalty. Staff members whispered among themselves, unsure of where things were heading. Some felt sadness, others frustration, and a few even felt betrayed. What makes the story different is that it didn't end with anger, it ended with silence. A heavy silence where everyone tried to make sense of what had happened. And while all of this was happening behind closed doors, Toure continued to stand on stage with the same calm smile, delivering messages as if nothing had changed. But those who truly knew him could see the weight behind his eyes. They knew he was carrying something bigger than he wanted to admit. John Gray shared that Toure's private struggles during this time were deeper than anyone outside could imagine. Nights where he questioned himself, moments where he doubted his path, and times when he wondered if he had made choices that couldn't be undone. Gray said that leadership was never meant to be easy, but the cost Toure paid was heavier than most realize. Behind every sermon, behind every post, behind every confident gesture, there was a man trying to survive the pressure of being perfect, and that pressure had finally caught up to him. As Gray reached the end of his story, he said one thing that left listeners stunned. This wasn't the final ending. There were still parts of Toure's journey that no one knew about. Private conversations, decisions made in quiet rooms, and truths that might someday come out. He said that people needed to understand that this story wasn't just about controversy. It was about the unseen weight leaders carry, the struggles they hide, and the battles they fight alone. It was about the gap between who someone is and who the world expects them to be. John Gray closed his revelation with a reminder that shocked many. Even the strongest people can break. Even the most confident leaders can struggle. And even the most admired figures can make choices that change everything. And while the world watched Toure shine on stage, only a few knew the cost of that shine. The story ended not with answers, but with questions. Questions that left viewers thinking long after the words faded. Because in the world of influence and faith, the truth was often much more complicated than anyone wanted to believe.